Bert! Get him! Yeah! Ron Babe was right.
I'm feeling spry. Hey everybody, I hope you had a great Memorial Day weekend. I don't know if you're a racing fan. I am not, by any stretch of the imagination, a racing fan, but I love tradition and history. I remember we always put on the Indy 500 and we watched, all that vintage photos of all the accidents and all this. That was like the best part. And then the race, it just goes around and around and around, and then somebody wins, and there's usually a crash or two. But I don't know if you noticed it, but one of the cars, you know how they got all their sponsors? Well, there was a Hunting Dog Podcast car. It was hard to see because it was like, 200 and some miles an hour. But if you slowed it down, if you go play it back, you'll see it. I think that car came in like 11th place, like right on top of it, like the top hood. When you get an aerial view of it, it said Onyx Hunt, Hunting Dog Podcast title sponsor. It said right on the hood. And then like all over the bumpers and the fenders, I saw Gunner Kennel stickers. I saw W Supply stickers. I saw Garmin. In fact, I saw one that said Garmin, and then the other one said Garmin 550 Plus. I saw K9 Athlete stickers on it. Mossberg shotgun stickers. Boss Shot Shell. Purina Pro Plan. They had their logo across the whole back bumper. Walton's was on the front grills because they lead, they're in the lead with everything we need for our wild game kitchen. Marshware, that was a left driver's door. Four-wheel camper was on the right driver's door. I mean, it was crazy. I kept saying, am I seeing things? I said, could that be a coincidence? And I'm like, my wife was watching just a little beginning of it with me. She goes, why don't see Gumleaf boots on there? I said, that's because Jack had a real problem with inventory and the factory closed down. But he just brought us Arcus USA, ARKUS, USA.com. So go check out Jack's new boots, another quality, 100% real rubber, not fake, not synthetic, not polypropylene, nothing like that. Handmade boots. They're it's just a thank God Jack is back. So it was crazy to see all of my sponsors on one race car. Of course, now I saw Four-Wheel Camper on another one, and I saw Walton's on another one. I think I saw two other cars with Marshware and Boss Shot Shells because I love their logo, right? That was, I think I saw that on, well, a lot of those drivers, are hunters too, and they all use Boss Shot Shells. The Mossberg, well, actually one of the drivers' names Mossberg. I'm not trying to put a connection there. K9 Athlete, you wouldn't think they would sponsor it, but the parent company, Wilderness Athlete, all the drivers at the Indy 500 use Wilderness Athlete products. Hydrate and recover, energy and focus, all that stuff. Garmin actually is controlling the inside of their car. Like they don't, this is not a conspiracy. They don't actually steer. Garmin is steering the way for that. W Supply, they supplied all the buckles, the seat belts, you name it, the helmets, everything the drivers needed. And again, besides all these stickers being on the race cars, there was if you looked at the pits, right? A lot of the pit guys bring their dogs to work. Well, Nashville is just down the road from Indianapolis, and Addison ran, I think, about 50 Gunner Kennel Intermediates up there in a vast variety of colors, along with food bowls and water bowls and everything. And all the pit crew's dogs were. It's really hard to see. The camera angles don't pick it up, but when you know what you're looking for. And then there was like an Onyx blimp that was, filming that pan view of the cars going around, and the blimp had Onyx on it. So this podcast is in some damn good company. Just like, you know what I did not see on there? I did not see a logo for Patreon. But Patreon patrons are actually just patrons of shows like this who get a little extra content or just want to show a little extra love. And my second tier list patrons, oh, they just got another episode of Hunting Dog Talk, like the history of my hunting dogs. It's going to take me probably 2 years to get through that. I put it in 30-minute chunks. They get that. And then all the patrons get discounts on Marshwear, Canine Athlete, Waltons, and then they all get invited to the Zoom room. And the last Zoom room, it lasted 3 hours and 13 minutes. We covered a lot of stuff. We covered a lot of stuff. We covered the fact that the Buckeye chapter lost their training grounds. That was a long conversation, trust me. We didn't really get out of the weeds from that one all night. So again, that was the only logo I did not see at the Indianapolis 500. Other than that, I'm full of shit, and you're listening to a fun show. This one, I've been wanting to do this in person. Probably for about a year now, and it's kind of funny. we go over a little bit of the history. Durrell Smith has had he's got a podcast. He had a couple different names, different rebranding, but here's a guy who used to listen to my podcast and decided, like, well, if Ron can do it, I can do it. I can do terrible audio recordings. I can do scratchy things from my truck. Like, he used to record in his truck. I thought I was bad with my cell phone and the microphone holding up above it. Anyway, we have talked a lot over the last couple years, and he was going to be up in Grand Rapids. We were going to do this in person, and I finally said, let's just do it. And you are going to learn a lot about a little, and a little about a lot. I hope you enjoy this episode. All right, everybody. I know some of my listeners know this name. I would venture to say that most of them know this name. Durrell Smith. We haven't shared a field together yet, but we've shared a lot of hours of conversation on the phone over the years. And I remember. Here's one thing I remember early on when you started your podcast, Durrell. I think you were talking to Nick Larson on his, maybe, and both of you said, "Yeah." He said, "All we ever did was listen to Ron's podcast. All we
did. Yep,
it was the only one. Like,
that was it.
You guys knew him chapter and verse." And I was like, I felt like, oh wow, there's two other podcasters. And I'm like, wait a minute,
dude. What we call you, the podcast godfather now?
Yeah, I'm the OG. I'm the OG.
You are the OG. I mean, dude, you got to think, man. Like, that was when
it was 2015 is when
because I had gotten, that was a year before that was the year I got my lab, actually, when you started, because and that was the thing that was like, man, I don't know how I'm gonna do this, but this dude on here, and it, is the only person on the air talking about this thing, because all the other information is in a book.
Right.
And honestly, man, the conversational style is what hooked me. Like, just the way that you just kind of were talking to people, it didn't feel like super contrived or nothing like that. And I was actually learning a ton.
Yeah, I had a lot of, like, you've been making, I should have finished the introduction. Durrell Smith, Sporting Life Notebook, formerly Gun Dog Notebook, formerly art teacher.
Yep.
Which that doesn't, I don't know a lot of art teachers that hunt. I mean, no, nothing against art teachers, but
I've met one other one.
Yeah. I've met a lot of millwrights and carpenters that hunt, right? But
makes sense.
Yeah. But you've got a strange path to where you've gone, and I'll probably pick on you at some point for putting collars around your dog's crotch, around their neck. But I'm going to say this without any embarrassment. When you first started your podcast, I would cruise to see who it was. Just like Nick, and then Tyler, and then you, and then I think Nick Adair, and Bob Owens came up. There was about 5 of them, and I was on the road all the time. It's all I listened to was podcasts. I got rid of my XM radio.
Yep.
And I remember your first one, and I'm like, oh my God, his audio is worse than mine.
It's so bad.
It was so
That
bad.
audio was
It was
so
so
bad.
bad. And it's like, because I used to get, I got iTunes reviews, and one of them is still in there somewhere. It
Yeah.
says, Ron, love your show. I'll donate money for better audio equipment. That's so
You at least got that. My reviews were like, what the hell is this?
right.
Why even try, basically?
Like, I can't hear it, you know.
Dude, and man, I was recording at the time. I had a red Dodge Ram 1500 pickup, 2-wheel drive at that. And I was recording out of that truck and driving, and
I know it sounded like it too.
yeah, and there was, and it was a '04, so there was no like no sound, anything. And for some odd reason, I honestly was doing it partly because I liked how yours were coming out. You know what I'm saying? And I figured if I did it long, I'm the type of person, if I do something long enough, I'll eventually figure it out and make it better. But what I cared the most about was the people that you had on. And
you had friends.
You weren't,
yeah,
but you weren't like worshiping them. They were just cool. Like it really felt like some homeboy type stuff. And I used to be a skateboarder back in the day. Being from Atlanta long before skateboarding was like cool. Okay. Long before it was cool. And that podcast, and I say this about Chugger Hunt too, but that your podcast very much so felt like sitting on the curb or sitting at the black box here in Atlanta with your buddies skating, you know what I'm saying? And everybody just kind of brings what they got to the table and you shoot the shit.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And you kicking it, and it just ain't formal. You know what I'm saying? Like it just ain't nobody trying too hard. And y'all were laughing at each other's dogs. You know what I'm saying? Y'all were celebrating each other. And that's honestly the culture when I got into this and got into the Black Handlers Trial, like Field Trial Club down here. It was kind of the same thing, but that was the thing that I really liked about your podcast. And like I said, I was learning a ton. And the other thing that I really do like, I don't think it hit me later, but y'all were grouse hunters.
Yeah.
Which inherently makes you a wild bird hunter. And that, you know what I'm saying? Like ain't no pen raised grouses. So that was
them.
Yeah. So it was really aspirational in that fact too. Like, dang, these guys, their dogs are really good. And, like it, and they're performing in this really, really cool habitat. And then y'all are going home and laughing about it. Like that was cool to me.
Well, I've always been like, if I can't enjoy myself, I'm not doing it. Even that's when I ran my company, a small construction company. I was my employee's best friend and the worst manager you could ever get.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just like getting done with work. I went out with them every night. I ate with them every, I mean, and I remember my wife came from the professional world, as a lot of my friends did, and I didn't. And I remember she said, we were in business for a year, and she said, you're going to have to do some reviews. I said, what's a review? She goes, well, you review the last year and how the guys did and base the raise on that. And I'm like,
right.
I review them every day of the week. I give them an extra $1 every January. I don't.
Right.
What are we doing here? So my podcast is the same way. It got a little better audio, but still remained like. And when I have a guest on that I really I like having a guest that can really carry the whole podcast.
Right.
But I really enjoyed the friend ones more. You know what I mean? Like this one. You and I talked last week. I think an hour and a half.
No, 2 hours.
2 hours.
It was 2.
And I'm like, I should have just recorded it, but we got a little into the weeds. So I don't mean weed. We got into the weeds.
Right. Into the weeds. Okay.
But I want to start. I want to get for the few folks that may not know you. I know you told me you ran track in school, and I said you were an art teacher, but where, when I thought of living up north, living down south, let alone Atlanta's just like Chicago, right? It's huge.
Yep. We are number 5 or 6 now in the nation.
Right. And the busiest airport in the world, I didn't have any hunting mentors. My dad wasn't a hunter. My buddy's dad was, so we were
Yeah.
lucky in a couple respects. But what was your like early thing? Like, was there what was something that made you like think I might want to go chase a bird someday?
Yeah. Two things. It was two specific instances. Um, and you talk about mentors. So first of all, coming up in private school, like is predominantly white. And by proxy of that in the South, especially on the South side of town, folks' parents hunted and they were bird hunters. Like wing
Okay.
shooting, there's a culture of it down
There
here,
was way
even in
more of that
Atlanta.
culture than Chicago. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Like it, people, I mean, it's obviously firearms culture, but people hunt down here. Like that's a thing. And going to private school, I didn't really know what my buddies were doing, but they were always gone around the same time, around November, with their dads, and they would always come back talking about these dogs and these birds and shooting, and they were just having the greatest time in the world. I was too busy trying to get a track scholarship to ever really dive into it, but it was kind of cool and it was a thought. Then, um, I because I'm an artist and I went to school at Albany State, in like the top part of the heart of quail country in Albany, Georgia.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Albany Museum, I would see bird dog images and thought, what in the world is this dumb looking birds and these dogs doing standing? Like, why is that art? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then fast forward. So I was having those images, but then the thing that got me was the two mentors that I haven't had. Eric Morris, he has a company, Non-Typical Outdoorsman TV. So he took me out, and I don't really like sitting in a deer stand. I'm not one of them. I'm not if I didn't have dogs, I wouldn't hunt. I'll put it that way. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna hunt anything that ain't got a dog in it.
Right.
And so he put me out he set some quail out in a field and took his Chesapeake Bay Retriever out actually. And was yeah, like in the heat, and that dog was flushing like a damn cocker. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, like it was a really good, and I just was having a ball. Like, I was like, screw all the other hunting. I like this here. And so that was a thing. That was when I got my lab. That's the thing that made me want to get my lab. Because at that point I was like, all right, I don't feel like I want a chessie. And I hear labs pretty much work. So like, let's
Yeah.
do that. And for $425 on Craigslist, you can be the happy owner of a Labrador Retriever. So that was the first thing. And then the second thing was my mentor who just recently passed away, Neil Carter. So I don't like going shopping. And so when I was at Publix down here, I was looking in the magazine section, and I like Garden and Gun magazine. We were talking about that at Seawee and all of that stuff. Well, that's the hunting, the lifestyle hunting magazine down here, the premier, blah, blah, blah. And they ran a story. Erwin Greenstein, who's a friend of mine now too, he ran a story on the field trial club that I'm a part of, the Georgia Florida Shooting Dog Handlers Club. We call it the Black Handlers Club. And I open up the magazine, and Neil is on this beautiful white horse, and he's got this pointer. And then Curtis, my other buddy, now I didn't know them at the time. He's got a beautiful white pointer on the tailgate, stacked up, both of them look like King Arthur, and it just looked official. I was like, I want to do that. Like,
Yeah.
whatever there, I grew up riding horses here in Atlanta too. Like, we got a black horse culture here, around the airport. And my mom, to keep us, she was from the hood, like from the West End. And so to keep us out of that, like, she was introducing me to art and all kinds of other different things. And horseback riding was a thing that I would do on the weekends. They would set up a corral outside the gas station, and all the neighborhood kids would come. And if you wanted to ride, you just rode. And so it was right down the street from Greenbrier Mall, next to the Texaco. Anybody from Atlanta that know. And you'll be like, there was a horse corral here? Like, yeah. And that's just we were resourceful. Like, Atlanta has that history, and we are just a very resourceful set of people down here. Like, you find horse stables in the city, because that was at a point, like, and I told you before, my grandma, she was the oldest resident, but I mean, before she passed, but she lives down the street from Tyler Perry Studios. And when she was growing up, and that's in the heart of Atlanta, when she was growing up, it was mules down the street, like, there's a whole culture of it.
Right.
And so by the time I got down to Thomasville and met Neil, and that was a cold call, I picked up the yellow pages, because plantations don't keep their numbers online. So I was like, well, the number got to be somewhere. Like I see Sinkhole Plantation in this article, and I'm gonna go pick up the yellow pages because I am a 90s child and I do know that that number has to be somewhere. So I called him, Gates Kirkham picked up, and he's super cool, owner of that place, friend of mine now too. And I'd asked if Neil was still working for him, and he had retired the year before. He was like, he stays on the back end of his property, butts up to the back end of mine. So he was like, here's his cell phone number, just give him a call. He'd probably like to hear from him. And here this old black dude is, old school Thomasville dog man. Hey, Mr. Carter, I read about your article in the magazine, and I'm hoping I can come down and learn something a little bit from you. And from there, it was off to the races.
Total cold call.
Straight cold call. Like, and that man poured everything he had into me. And I went down there, and he had a kennel. I still have the video from the first day I was with him. Like, it was 11 pointers and a couple of setters back there. And I was like, oh, and I used to train pit bulls back long time ago. Like, that's just what you did here. And so I didn't think these dogs was a whole lot of nothing. I was like, man, I'm used to pits.
They don't got enough neck.
Yeah, man. Shit. Neil was like, man, go get that dog right there. And that joker, his name was, I didn't know the dog. They called him John. He's like, go get John. But that dog's whole name was Jailbreak John. And you ever come up on a dog named Jailbreak John?
There's a reason. There's a reason.
And I couldn't handle that dog to save my life. Like, dog almost pulled my arm off, and it was like when Neil got it and had the check cord in his hand, that dog completely flipped his gear and like just turned into the bird dog. Like, and I was like, what type of voodoo did you just put on that dog? I was
gonna say, you just met a magician.
And I was in awe. I was like, and so I was, as a teacher, like I would get done. I was teaching middle school at the time. I was teaching 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Okay. I was the only art teacher in the school, and it was a rough, low income school, and I needed something to get my brain. So I would pack my bags on Fridays when we got out, go home, get a couple of hours of sleep, wake up, drive down to Thomasville at like 2 or 3 in the morning, be down to Neil's house or wherever they were training at down there by like 6 or 7, and train all day and work with them and ride horses and learn from them and do all of that stuff, and then be back home by Sunday morning.
Wow.
And I did that for a long time, actually.
I didn't want to make your head get too big, but what I was going to say, from what you started and your dog knowledge was obvious when you started your podcast, right?
Yeah.
Well, it was, but now that's where you got it's like learning another language and going to the country to speak the language. You just immersed yourself, and whatever this guy said was the gospel.
Right.
And because I always remember, like, you went in a relatively short amount of time.
I had a hell of a learning curve. Like,
right.
Yeah.
And most people would be on maybe their second dog.
Right. I've had a lot of dogs.
You've already had a lot of dogs. You've been to a lot of places. Like, you jumped in with both feet, like just. But I always remember in the beginning, like, God, this guy doesn't know nothing.
Dude, I was swinging in the wind, man. Like,
you couldn't have got where you are now if you didn't have that guy, because it would take too long to learn that much stuff. And
well, you got to think, Neil was getting me, like, not only was I learning from him, Neil was heavily and highly respected in the community. So like,
right.
And his granddaddy was, and his uncle was. And so I was also getting access to like plantations and a lot of places that honestly most people just otherwise wouldn't be able to. And I was seeing how dogs act on wild birds in real time, and like at the same time basically getting a collegiate education for bird dogs in a very short amount of time from people that have been doing this since their learned it from their grandparents.
But I think one of the cool things is that you didn't even have another vein or lane to drive in. You just you stuck right in that lane, and you got Tennessee Walkers, and you're in field trials. You travel now. You're guiding for Orvis. I mean, like people just don't do that in like 6 years normally.
No, and it's a blessing, Ron.
Yeah.
I don't take it for granted.
But how old was he when you met him? You said he was already kind of retired.
Neil, no, he was so Neil was in his 70s when I met him. So he was early 70s.
All right.
I think he probably 71, 72, something like that. So he was in his early, if not in his 70s, late 60s going into 70s. And he had already had a 50-year career in working dogs. And that's before he even quote unquote started working. So Neil would always tell me, he was like, I mean, I professionally worked dogs for 50 years. Like, but he was like, you gotta think my granddaddy was a dog man. So like
he was feeding dogs when he
yeah, he was like, I was taking care of my granddaddy's puppies when I was little.
Yeah.
That
almost makes you envious that somebody
oh God, yes.
That like that the world could almost go by, yet his life like never changed in essence. I mean,
dude, it is I
changed, but everything he learned from his those are the guys that they look at pups and they see stuff that we don't see, and they look at a dog that we think is bad and they're like, no, that's good,
yeah. And it's magic. I don't get it, man. Like Neil, Curtis, all of these guys, they can look at something and I mean, it's like yay, nay, yay, nay, yay, nay. And it's very matter of fact and just done.
Right.
It's what I most enjoyed about it, man, when I think about it, and it's funny you mentioned gospel. I'm actually working on a project called The Gospel of Great Dogmen, and it follows basically what ended up happening is being down there. I was just listening and recording and listening and recording and listening and recording. And you find out when you think about it, you quantify it. It's like something like 150, 200 years worth of knowledge. If I think about like Neil's grandfather and his and stuff. And I just had all of this stuff, like either written down, recorded, or both, or in a film or whatever. And so this project that I wanted to put together is called The Gospel of Great Dogmen. And what I really am most interested in doing is actually documenting the orated techniques and philosophy and thought process and methodology that these guys were using to train and break their dogs, paired with the stories that they were giving me, that I'm just sitting there, like Neil had a thing. He would get a bottle of Blanton's out. That joker loves some Blanton's. And you talk about like you talking about a good time. You get that man a bottle of Blanton's, and I have a photo that something was just like, take this picture. And it was me and his legs. We were just sitting under his shed, like after a day of working dogs, like, snake boots and shit on, or chaps or whatever like that down by your ankles, just like we're done. And it's a bottle of Blanton's in his hand. And we were like, that moment sticks in my head because he would just like, it was like the moment he poured it, he would just unleash. And it just story after story and critiquing my dogs and this and what do you think about this? And, and it was nuts, man. Like I really, really, really miss those times. Like it's still very, very, very front facing.
Fortunate to have it. Like, you could have missed it, right?
Yeah, very much so.
You absolutely could have missed it. And not that this has anything to do with dogs, but when I moved to Michigan from Chicago, I always say Chicago because I don't want to say Illinois. It was Chicago.
It was the shy.
Illinois was a beautiful state from there south. Chicago, But then I moved to Michigan and I met a guy named Jerry Bazell. He did my septic tank when we bought this property. And he was just like your mentor, except he had nothing to do with dogs. It was all construction, cranes, bulldozers, sawmills. And the same way, at the end of the day, you just were like absorbing.
Yeah.
Like, how could this guy know this much shit
and
never forget it? And then lend a hand to tweak, like in my case, of like I needed something. I'll never forget. This is a weird. This is a weird rabbit hole, but I got to say it.
Yeah, go for it.
So we put a well in outside of the garage for a sprinkler system.
Yep.
Like in Chicago, we just had this little teeny lawn you mowed with a push mower, and now I needed to mow a lawn. And he said, you got to put a sprinkler system in. He said, we'll put a stab well in. And I'm like, I don't know what a stab well means. In Chicago, your water comes out of the faucet, your
Right.
shit down the toilet. We don't.
Right.
Anyway, a few years down the road, that I couldn't prime my pump for my sprinkler system.
Mm-hmm.
And I called up Jerry and I said, Jerry, I can't get my well. He goes, and he was always like real mean to me, but he loved me. He'd be like, ah, damn it, Ron. All right. He comes over to my house. He was only 10 years older but he acted like he was 80 years older.
Yeah. Yeah.
He says, you got a 22? I said, yeah, I got a 22 rifle. Yeah, give me a 22. He took off the well cap and he shot the barrel of the gun down the well.
Oh, shit.
To release all the rust and corrosion that falls down the well point. And the well worked.
What?
Right. And I'm like, who knows this shit?
What? First of all, okay, so stuff like that makes me think, who was the first person to try it?
Who was the first person to go like, God, I wonder if I shot a bullet to the end of the well point, would that get me through the next season?
Right.
But I'll bet you your mentor, what was his name again?
Neil Carter Jr.
I'll bet you Neil had that same bag of tricks.
It
like
was
the dog
always
that wouldn't do this, or the dog. He goes, oh, geez, Durrell, just do this.
Yep.
You're like,
yep.
Oh,
what? Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, it took me a long time to like in a situation like that, like you're apprenticing essentially. And it means a lot to earn that man's respect. And it took the longest time for him to be like, damn, Durrell, that's a nice dog. Like, and because he was always critiquing something, but it was like he always knew whatever my dog, and he didn't own my dogs. That's the thing. It wasn't until right before he died that he actually owned one of mine. But before, he would always know what my dog was doing, like the next step beforehand, right? He would always know in a field trial setting, like we call it stealing each other's dogs. Like me and that joker, I was doing my Beretta film, matter of fact, the Beretta tribe film, and we were running, for the sake of the film, this is a little rabbit hole story, but for the sake of the film, we were simulating a field trial, but at the same time, we were killing birds too.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So old school field trial, I guess. But anywho, dogs, wagons, all of that stuff. And we going, and me and Neil ride next to each other and talking cash money shit to each other. I mean, just like jabbing at each other, right? And he's got his dog. He actually had Jailbreak John, and I had my jughead dog on the ground. And he was going, and he would call, and I was getting at him or whatever. And he just knew, I don't know what he did, but he knew how to take my dog away from me, like stealing each other's dog. And he would like find a way to mimic my call or something like that. And it was a point, I'm talking shit, like getting at him. Whole time, my hands are not on the steering wheel, dude. Like, and he is just laughing because he knows he done got my dog. And I try to call him one way, and my dog ends up going with his. And he was like, yeah, so while you were talking, and it was just weird little things like that, man. Or he could see, his thing is he never liked dogs that pointed on three legs. Like everybody likes the dog with the leg up and stuff. He never
wanted all four.
He wanted all four on the ground. He hated dogs that pointed with three legs.
Yeah.
Because he was like, that dog is about to walk. That dog is about to walk.
Well, I can picture that in my head. You're right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And for him, the standard was, like super staunch, steady to wing and shot and all of that stuff. So, and that was his job. So moving, when you got clients that are paying that much for a plantation hunt or whatever, he was like, that's not really, we don't do that. Like, I need to know that this dog is 1000% broke, and he could like look at my dogs and stuff. When I thought I had a dog steady to wing, shot and fall.
Right.
Nope. That dog ain't broke. Look at that on his something something, or look at that, and
Right.
up he about to move, and it was just like, damn it,
He's
dude.
turning his head, or he's
Yeah, like something that was,
he's thinking about breaking.
yeah,
Yeah.
basically, and it was some weird, like, it's super minute detail that he always would catch.
Yeah.
And it meant the world to me. Right before he passed away, I was able to finish one of my best dogs. I had a setter named Honey. And he loved that dog so damn much. And I said, you know what? And my brain, I was like, if I finish this dog and she's good, I'm gonna give him to her. And because he said, man, Durrell, if you ever think about selling that dog, man, don't sell it. Just, I'll buy it from you. I'm not gonna sell you a dog, man. Like, you
Right.
taught me every damn thing. Like, and so I was like, oh, all right, man. I ain't getting rid of the dog, whatever. And so something came up. I think I ended up like making a decision to actually move it for something else. I'll move a dog and bring something else in that I think might get me a little closer to my goal. But anyway, he calls me and he was like, hey, I heard you think about moving that dog. I was like, yeah. He was like, how much you want for her? And I was like, what? And he liked that dog that much. He was like, Durrell, you've done a really good job with that dog. And the way that she runs, he was like, you ain't left a whole lot of fingerprints on her. Like, she just looked natural. And that dog just brought the biggest smile to his face every time he saw her. Like,
That had to feel good.
yeah, man. I got a picture of him thumbing up with the doggone point in front of him, like, doing this, and he, being silly Neil, and I mean, she just locked up like right in front of him, and he was like, hell yeah, like that dog that I had finished made him so happy,
And he wasn't even thinking of the fact that he's only got years, months, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys don't think about the end.
There is no end. Like,
they're not like, well, I better not get another dog because I've heard people say it, and I've heard people that bought dogs from me like, well, this is probably going to be my last dog, and I'm like,
I never heard Neil say that.
How can you say that? Right.
I don't get it. That man, when he passed, he had 11 dogs in his kennel.
Right.
Like, and 11, not all grown dogs, puppies. Mm-hmm. Like, that concept, time is from sun up to sundown, dog in, dog out.
Yeah.
It's not, I never heard that man like, oh, when my time comes. Like, he was one of the original founders of that field trial club, and I still never heard. I went to some of his buddies and mentors' grave sites, and I still never heard that man talk about his end,
Yeah.
It was very much so about celebrating history and understanding that and all of this, but I don't know. I mean, that's just not how like, time doesn't really work like that in Thomasville.
Yeah, it's such a culture that I mean, that culture, I know Thomasville is the center, but it hits what, a little northern Florida, a little Alabama, a little
man.
But it's
it's great. Yeah.
It doesn't go north of the Mason-Dixon line and west of the Mississippi. It's culture is there.
It's there, and it's I will say, Ron, it's very, very, very niche. Like, everybody geeks out on like the mule-drawn wagon thing in the South. That is a very niche thing specific to Thomasville and Albany. Like, that's a Red Hills thing.
Yeah.
That historically, that doesn't go very often outside of that area. I mean, you may see instances of it here and there, maybe Alabama, one or two in South Carolina, but for the most part, that is a uniquely Red Hills thing, and when I was talking to buddy of mine, Charlie Chapin, who owns El Soma Plantation, and a lot of the times, I do stuff there, and Dog Willie and Eric and all of them are good friends of mine, and again, it just helps that you have that kind of help in those resources, right? But when I was talking to Mr. Chapin, I was like, man, what? Because he's like, shoot, Mr. Chapin's got to be, if he's not 90, he's damn near there.
Yeah.
And and this is the same dude, a 90-year-old, that when you talk about time, white-haired, old dude, owns a plantation, hops on this incredibly beautiful, not small Tennessee Walker, throws a 410 side by side in his scabbard, and is the meanest motherfucker on some wild quail. Okay, like, this man, I mean, and we'll get to it, and hunts 6 out of the 7-day week, and only not on Sunday because Miss Jeannie say you can't, you got to go to church. Like,
Right, right. Yeah,
and
it's nowhere. You still got that, you know?
yeah.
Got that.
Like, and so, I mean, it's cool. It's just, I would talk, what I was getting at is I would talk to Mr. Chapin, just about what it was like when he was growing up, right? Like,
Right.
you know, what is it like when you own one of the oldest plantations in Thomasville? If not the oldest, one of the oldest.
Right.
Like, your granddaddy was doing what you're doing now. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, like considering the times and all of that stuff, but like, let's really have a conversation. What was that like? And why do people use the wagons and the mules and stuff like that down here? You know, and he was like, honestly, it wasn't for show. He was like, the show part came later. He was like, man, we were just trying to get from point A to point B.
Right.
I was like, oh, it just wasn't that deep. It was just, no, that's just how we got around because the property was so big. And by proxy of having dogs on the ground, I mean, we hunted our way from one side of the property to the other.
Right.
You know, and he was like, you know, it was cool. You talk about falling asleep on the back of the wagon. You know, like, what is it like to fall asleep on the back of a quail wagon? You know?
Yeah.
Because you just got that many birds around and you do this every day.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that had to be, God, if there was a way to go back in time,
Oh man.
I've always told everybody, they'll say, what's your favorite bird to hunt? And I said pheasant, because I started on pheasant.
Right.
And I think they are, when you get into wild pheasants, they are the meanest, the sneakiest, the trickiest. They don't play by any rules, right? Yet you can go to preserves, you can even go to South Dakota, and every one of them is not a wild bird.
Right.
But when you get into some wild pheasants, that to me, like, I want to know what that was like from the first day. And the other culture I would go back in time would be to being down south when I met people when I moved to Virginia. My buddy Chip had a picture of his uncle and a string, like a belted string of quail.
Oh yeah.
You know, just like a whole black and white photo from 1920.
Really?
And Chip still got a little trophy loving cup from a little field trial in the Shenandoah Valley that his great uncle and the dog's name is on the loving cup, you know.
Yeah.
That if I could go back in time, I want to pop there.
That'd be cool, man.
I can't, but I've seen good grouse numbers, I've seen good pheasant numbers, I've never seen quail like they used to. Like, who's seen except people like that?
Yeah.
Quail.
So
almost a pestilence, right?
It's so funny you say this. So there is this theory that also I got from down that way too. And I think this is a theory, but coming from plantations too, they were like, asking about what birds were like way back then. They say there were so many of them. The quail actually didn't fly that far. Like they would get up, and Mr. Chapin was like, yeah, you could actually see where they went down. He was like, now there's some accounts and podcasts and anybody that hunts down here, especially on public land, noted like quail down here, when they're gone, they're gone. Like, you don't really get a lot of reflushes. When they're gone, them jokers, they are the fastest jokers in the world. Well, basically the quail started doing that. This is a theory and speculation. You know how that is. Let me disclose that. But they were just like, natural selection made them fly off. Like, they just shot all the short blind ones, so the rest of them left.
So they used to be like woodcock, basically.
Yeah, like they used to be
down.
like, and he was like, now they don't do that no more. Like, they be gone, but I take that, and I also say, like, I was mixing that experience with public land hunting too, right? So, like,
I remember early on, you were talking about, finding a little spot and getting into a handful of birds.
Yeah.
And I was I don't want to say impressed, but I was like, you wanted that bit of a challenge. Like, okay, I might put in 3-4 hours, I might not find any.
It's
And
worth it.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, well, it always comes back to what do people say, wild birds or birds make a bird dog.
yeah.
Um, and Ron, like, bro, I was a teacher. Like, didn't nobody have a whole lot of money to be paying for pen birds and this and that? Like, not at $4 a bird. And this is especially when I got my lab. Like, first of all, it's a flushing dog. Like, it ain't a whole lot of different mechanics. Once you get the idea, like, all right, let's just go find. I can spend my time figuring that out. And I also got wind, like every time I would talk to my wife about going to get some birds, she kind of look at me like, good Lord, you spending some more money. So,
Yeah,
like, all right, there has to be a much more economical way to do this. Like, and I can't imagine that people 40, 50 years ago were buying a bunch of pin birds. If the Georgia Department of Natural Resources says that I can legally hunt quail here in Georgia, there must be some wild quail somewhere.
Quail, right?
I don't know where they are, but I'm willing to roll my dice on, all right, like I can predict how much it's gonna cost me every time I want to drive 3.5 hours from Atlanta to Thomasville, go to a spot and really max out that WMA, you know what I'm saying, and really investigate it.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. There's not really any loss there, and I'm learning every time I do it. And so by the time I had picked up my first pointer, I was looking at habitat already. So it really helped out. So by the time I wanted to get Vegas in the birds, and this is before I had a lot more access to more private spots, I was using public land, and like I would just, do what I did with my lab, and eventually you stumble into birds,
Right.
but I tell people I would rather put my money into gas, like into the gas miles, like in the South. Yes, you're going to use some pin birds, sure.
Yeah.
But there's a point where the dog doesn't really need them that much more anyway. So you might as
Right.
well just go start hunting.
Yeah. You've traveled a bit now over the
Yes.
last few years,
Mhm.
which and that's another thing again, not trying to, I don't want to inflate your ego, but when I started hunting, it was all around Illinois.
Mhm.
I didn't go on my first trip till I was in Michigan and I got invited to go to South Dakota. Now I'm kind of addicted to traveling somewhere.
Right. Right.
But a lot of people that start out, they don't, it takes them almost decade or decades to become a traveling wing shooter. You also had that desire to, like, I may not be the best one at this. I may not have the best dog, but let's go see what Kansas has to offer. Let's go see what Nebraska
Try
has
it.
to offer.
Yep. Yep.
And you and I were talking last week on that long phone call, and you've kind of skipped a version of, they say, like, you start hunting, you're worried about limits, then you're worried about your dog's performance, then eventually, like, you kind of you kind of skipped some of that and just went like, I just want to go somewhere with my dog and have a good time
Yep.
and get a bird or two
Yep.
birds.
Yep.
And
Yep.
that's, it doesn't seem like you've had a lot of, like, limit lust, I'll call it, right?
Yeah, I mean, because the thing is, let's just be real down here. I've gotten close to limits down here in Georgia. Like I've gotten close, and it's hard enough to do that. But I again, this is the benefit of having mentors and stuff like that. Like my mentors and the people that I were around, half them jokers, they don't really keep a lot of guns like that anyway. But like it just, the dog piece was what it is. Like
Yeah.
the first time I actually killed a wild bird, and it was like in Kansas, matter of fact. And it was with my lab. My first wild quail I ever shot was actually in Kansas. And everything that led up to it, like when I took a second to look back at it, everything that led up to that one bird falling, that was more interesting to me than the actual damn killing of the bird. Like because it happened so quickly and such by surprise. And you kind of find out that regardless of how, like when you think that training isn't paying off or your dog isn't doing something, certain moments during the hunt really show you that, like, oh shit, my dog actually is listening to me. Like he
Mhm.
might be a jerk right now, but oh dang, like in the moment's notice, that was it. But then also, so it was moments like that. But then the other part is, man, like I traveling to me, if I shoot more birds, I mean that's cool, but I wanted to travel so much and see my dogs really perform on something that's truly wild. Because I just really didn't get out of the city of Atlanta anyway when I was a kid.
Right, right.
So like for me, the gun piece is cool. Like I'm an artist. I like nicely made, and I've got nice guns, but to me, I can practice clay shooting and all of that stuff to the day is long, and that's great. But anybody that's bragging on how well a shot they made, it comes off kind of boasty. Whereas when you're looking at my dog, like that's kind of like looking at a painting. It's hard to be like, man, that doggone point down there in the horizon is just a really ugly thing, and I don't want to hear like that. That doesn't happen.
Right.
And I started noticing too, anytime you wanted to introduce people to the outdoors and to bird dog, had him watch a pointer or a setter go on point, like, and just snap into it. Like, that's the kind of stuff that I got really interested in. And the killing part was it at a point, it just seems like another thing. And then the other thing, I don't like the feeling that I get when I'm just like, man, I got to go out there and kill a bird. Like,
Right, right.
dude, it's just not that real, man. And I don't want to represent that. Like, I don't want to represent and that's not knocking anybody who is a killer. Like, I
Yeah.
get it.
I
I
mean,
get it.
nobody was going to turn down a limit. Like you're not going to go.
No, like,
Like I was really hoping I'd only get two today.
yeah,
But
like,
I met. You've probably heard of Ben Williams out in Montana, right?
yep. Got a number of his books. Yep.
And when I first started, like, all right, now I gotta do podcasts, not just tailgate things with my buddies. I started, reaching out through magazines, and I got a hold of Ben Williams. At that point, he was probably late 70s. He might have been 80 already.
Yep.
And I remember the one thing, he told me, he said when he moved to Montana, he shot a limit of Huns every day of the season. He says, I'm not going to tell you what the limit was. And I'm not going to tell you how many days the season was. Do the math. He says, now I shoot an occasional bird for the edification of the dog and the splendor of the table.
There you go. There you go. I love that. I'm
And
actually taking that from you.
isn't that great? I mean,
That's great.
like, the dog did his work and we're going to have a meal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he said after he got that, he was a school teacher in Montana. And yeah, he had bloodlust, but after that, he just said it wasn't about killing, it was about the whole picture. And with him too, the dog, always the dogs,
Yep.
And I love that saying, for the edification of the dog and the splendor of the table.
I love it.
I mean,
I'm
not
that's what it
saying you're
is.
there yet, but you're kind of
I'm creeping up on it.
right. You're kind of skipping the 40s and 50s where you're like, let's go here, let's get,
It just
I chased limits back in the day, I went up, but
I mean, let me tell you, Ron, when you work your butt off, again, like Oregon, for example, right? Like you work your butt off to get dogs pointed on quail. Like there's so many, if I'm worried about my gun and making a well-placed shot, I personally feel like I'm missing so many small, subtle clues that are going on before the point, during the point, and after the point. You know what I'm saying? Like when my dog goes on point Vegas this past season in Oregon, and he knows that I'm figuring this thing out, and I know that he's figuring this thing out along with another young dog behind him. And he finally establishes a point, and that joker turns and looks back at me with like a, hey, are you here? Are you in place? Like, that's cool to me. You know what I'm saying? Right. And not like unfocused. No, it was a very like, all right, dude, are you ready? All right. And by the time I got to him, my other dog goes and backs. And like, that's cool because these two haven't hunted together before, and as young buck respecting the old dude and old dude checking in with co-captain. And then we start triangulating these birds. Like stuff like that is really cool. Like if I'm too worried about a shot, I don't see that. That's my opinion. And the other thing is I like a 410 because if I do make the shot, I earned it. Like everything had to come together for that thing to work. Like you're making very few and seldom Hail Mary shots with a 410, right? I'm either pulling a trigger or I'm not, and
not wishing on a wish.
I'm not wishing. I'm either pulling it or I'm not. And so for me, it is the verification that somewhere deep down in my spirit, I felt like all the pieces to the puzzle in this sequence or scenario came together.
Yeah.
That's what does it for me. It's cool, but I like all the other 50 million things that are going on before that bird flushes.
Right. And I never, when I started doing it, it was just a social thing. It was just, let's go together. We're going to hit a bar. We're going to hit some new bars in South Dakota. We're going to meet some farmers. Oh, and by the way, we're probably going to shoot some birds, When I started judging dogs, that's when things changed for me, because I love just trying to think like what that dog's thinking about. And they don't think, but they think in their own right.
Yeah, I think they're thinking about something, man. I really do.
That's where I also said, you've been through a lot of dogs. We talked about, we won't get into that, but like, I don't want to say that the word's not true dogmen, but guys who love the dog side of this will put a dog in another person's hands. Will take another dog from another person. It's almost always about the next dog and the next experience and the next challenge. And that's what I liked about judging. I felt like if I judged 7 or 10, maybe in a big year, maybe 8 or 9 weekends around the country, I felt like I went on 8 or 9 hunting trips.
Yeah.
Back then, my wife only gave me one hunting trip. One. I could go to South Dakota for 1 week, but I could judge, from Maine to California, get up. I felt like I was on a hunting trip, and it was just like trying to do the best analysis of like what that dog's performance was. Like, that's so I got again, I'm never gonna, hey, if another bird comes up, I'm gonna take my 3 birds,
Absolutely.
But I am totally happy if I get a bird, but I see something that I can recognize in a dog. Like a not always a young, even an old dog, like, oh shit, you did it.
Yeah. And it's like in the moments that you don't think is gonna happen.
Right. Yep. I remember I had a dog up in the UP one time, one of my first Bronco, and she was no one's gonna brag on a Bronco. I mean, they're lovable dogs. They're like a golden retriever that's bred with a hound. But she did something. It was under a cedar fall, and I was walking this little creek, and I saw her on point so far ahead of me, and I'm like, oh, she's usually never been that good, And she was more of a preserve dog, and occasional. She was never a good grouse dog. I'll be really honest. And probably the bird was the right age, probably young, but I watched it, and I got up this creek, and that bird went across the creek, and I dropped it, and she went and got it. I got one grouse on that trip.
Hey,
one grouse.
But that is a lifetime of memory.
It's
a lifetime.
If I could write well and paint, it would be a great short novel that day.
You write it anyway, man. Write it. Matter of fact, you are a great podcaster. Tell the story on the podcast.
Durrell, the last time somebody asked me to write, because they all assume because I've been around this game for a long time, like that I've been asked to write articles here and there and or contribute to something. And I can't remember who I might have been for Project Upland, or it might have been for, I can't remember who it was for. I had to write something, and I called up Reed Bryant, and I sent him a draft. I said, Reed, make this look like I didn't go to Chicago public school.
I would have paid to be on a fly on the wall for what Reed had to say.
Oh, he said he would do it, but I would love to be him going like, holy crap. How about some let's start with punctuation. Jeez.
You called it right. I love Reed to death, but
Yeah.
that Joker there, he is my favorite writer, but he is thorough. Like,
Oh God, yeah.
he don't miss a beat, man.
He's too thorough. He's too thorough.
Yes.
He's so thorough that he cleans the gun halfway through the day. You know, I got to hunt with him up in upstate New York. He came up to a grouse hunt, and we spent a day and a half together. And yeah, we had a great time. But the experience that you get with your it's different for everybody, but there's only like 6 different differences. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When people say like dogs are like snowflakes, they're all different. No, they're not all different.
No.
But there's certain things that stand out, certain things that grab you. And going back to your mentor, you know, Neil, when he saw a dog, he probably had this like, what are those guys that like can do the memory math? They have like autism or something, or what is that? Like a savant, like a
like a genius savant or something like that. Is that what the word?
Yeah, but there's another word. But when
it was called genius savant. Okay,
when that guy saw a dog, his brain probably racked up 40 dogs that's like that.
Yeah. And he immediately is like a Rolodex of memories.
Yeah.
Yep.
It was like,
yep.
seen that before. How did you? And they would remember it, you know. Yeah.
It was amazing. And I just take those moments in, you know. And it was just, I don't know. It's just people like that, man. They don't like, I don't know if it was a generational thing or something. Like, people like that are just built different. They talk different. They got a different swag.
I think they're different. I think they just have a different memory for that. Like, I'll bet you reading, writing, and arithmetic wasn't his forte, but that was probably like I've met coon hunters up here. Coon hunting's pretty big up here, you know, with the night hunts and the walkers. And I've listened to a couple of podcasts. There's a few out there still.
Yep.
On hounds. And here's something about you get some of them old guys, they can recite the pedigree.
Dude.
The pedigree.
It is impressive. I mean, they read it like it's a book.
Yeah. They're like, oh no, he was out of her, she was out of him, she was out of her, and her. And they're going back like 10 generations.
Yeah, and can tell you every detail.
I can't tell you who my dog's mom is after I bought it. I feel, but I love somebody who can do that.
It's those guys though. I mean, I guess, is it a thing where like maybe money wasn't really that great? So like you knew what you had because you probably spent a whole lot to get, you know, like
it probably has something to do with it. Yeah. But there was probably 40 other people his age that weren't as good as him. You know?
Yeah.
But you've also got mentors now, right? I mean, they're not all like that Dogmen film I watched a couple weeks ago.
Yep.
I wanted to be there with you. You guys laugh so freaking hard. Everything's a joke. I'm like, this is my people.
Yeah.
Going there.
Come on.
I'm going there to poke fun. Like, what'd you say? No, you couldn't possibly have said that. Like, that is where, you know, maybe it exists in bowling alleys. I doubt it. Maybe it exists on a golf course, except they're too serious because, you know, if you're having a bad game.
Yeah.
But there's like no bad day unless you are doing it for the wrong reason, I think. You know,
and we not gonna keep nobody around that's doing it for the wrong reason. You know, like
right. Those guys get filtered out.
They get filtered out. Like to come into the club, you gon' I mean, when I came in, I had to meet Neil, right? Neil put me to Curtis and Curtis put me to Willie, and you get passed around and you go and you just because it's a brotherhood. Like, you know, now in a brotherhood, a fellowship now, because we've got, you know, the first woman, Manda, who's now joined, and she's fucking phenomenal. But, you know, ain't nobody like, there's enough stress in the world now, right? With bills and God knows whatever else.
Yeah.
And we out there with the dogs. Like, how do
Right.
you have a bad day when you looking up at like 8 o'clock in the morning and like the dust is red rising up off the red clay, and you got horses snorting and stuff at you, and you know what I'm saying, and coffee brewing and dogs turned up, like it just makes you ready. You'd be like, okay, like we
Right.
in here. And even if the hunting is slow, like it's just pretty. Like you got to be a fool to be mad, man. It's just not that. And there's a way to critique, because I mean, we're still, it's just as intense as I guess any NABDA training day or something like that. Like we're still getting work done, but like
you're looking for an end result.
yeah, there's always an end result. Like, those, I'm a guide now, and those guys are hunting guide, and they're guiding, every day. So there's an end result, but like, why can't we laugh and joke and share that love for each other at the same time?
Yeah. Yeah. That film I watched, it was, I don't know, was it 15 minutes, 20 minutes? It was
about 20 minutes. Yep.
And every time the camera went to all them guys just laughing and poking fun, and they were poking fun at you a little because you're the young
all
guy.
the time.
I'm surprised they don't make you come down, cook breakfast, and saddle the horse, right? Like, Durrell, the horses ain't saddled yet.
I did my time. It's saddling horses, because it's not a, hey, do you know how to saddle a horse, right? It's, hey, can you go saddle those horses? When you get down there and you don't say no. So my first time, I did not know how to saddle a horse. I just kind of threw that bad boy on, and they were like, oh no, this is wrong. This is very wrong. Like this, and you get it, right? Like it comes over time and things like that. But the other part about it is, let one of them young dogs run off. They don't feel like going to get them.
Right.
And these are like, these are motor, they're pointers. So they got some motor. So like running off on a plantation is running off. Like you dipping through the piney woods with a horse and you going to taste that. And they like that is your break-in process, stuff like that.
That's your
like you going to get the runoffs and stuff like that. And
we all did it when they were your age or younger,
they did it. Yeah. And and so I mean, it wasn't so much like ain't nobody scooping kennels or stuff. Like you hear stories about that, like I didn't do that. But it's more about your interactions with the dogs, and are you willing, like what does your dedication look like?
Right.
Because they also sniff out a lot of guys that are coming down there looking to get some kind of notoriety or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Like that aren't really genuine about it. And it also, the catch to it is like that club, a lot of people think it follows like American field standards. It doesn't. It's not sanctioned in anywhere else but Thomasville. So like we do what we want.
Yeah.
I mean, there are rules and there are things like that, and the standards are there, but we don't have to let anybody in.
We only like people we like.
We only like people we like. Like, be cool and you can come. But if not, you're not gonna get in. And it just makes life a lot easier. It just makes life a whole lot easier, man.
And that has to come sometimes. It has to come from being how you're brought up. I know I just did a podcast with Pat Durkin up in Wisconsin, and we kind of reminisced about.
I was listening to that one earlier today.
We really didn't talk about dogs, of course. We just talked about the old days. But there was things expected of you, and if you did what the older people told you to do, they welcomed you in, and eventually you became the older person.
Yeah, and then you do the same thing, for someone else, and there's that spirit of deference, right? Like that you don't disrespect your grandmama, your granddaddy, your daddy, and all of that stuff. And they ask you to get up and do it, you just do it.
When you met those guys, they were pretty, like what we called everybody, they were immediately like adopted uncles.
Yeah,
like
immediately.
Like whatever you say.
And everybody had their own personality, right? And everybody handles a little bit different or has a different quirk or likes this, like that. I mean, but it's all if you go down there with good intentions, right, and you go down there with the right kind of spirit, it's always good.
Yeah. I will. It's I don't want to say I don't like the word bucket list, but it's
Yeah.
appropriate, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I only had one, and it was a very hoity-toity. It was at Bray's Island.
Oh yeah.
You
I
know,
remember you talking about that. Yeah.
right. But I did see a pointer there. I think it was Dave Miller had it. And I'd never seen a dog like this in my life.
Yeah.
Like when this dog went on point, they used a cocker for flushing.
Mm-hmm.
And in all the dogs I've judged in NAVDA, and there's been some great dogs I've judged in NAVDA, that when that pointer went on point, that cocker went out and retrieved shot birds, came back and flushed more because they're planted birds. They're planted in coveys, and that's irrelevant to the. What's not irrelevant is that pointer did not lose 1% of style.
Nope.
While that cocker went out and back, flushed more, out and back, we're shooting. And I looked over at that dog. I'm like, somebody did like a Twilight Zone freeze frame.
Yep.
And I got to see one of them dogs like that.
Well, Ron, you tell me when you want to come, and what we'll do, we'll set it up. It ain't gonna be none of that form. No, you gonna come work dogs with us. Like, I know you don't like horses, but we'll put you on a horse.
Well, I don't. It's not that I don't like horses. I had 2 failed attempts at owning.
Okay, all right. So you just had
I don't
two
know
bad
if I ever said it on a podcast, but when my buddy Jeff, who was my first bird hunting buddy in Michigan, he saw an advertisement for a field trial.
Okay.
Fenville, Michigan. When my dad was still alive, my dad was up. He took a drive with me and Jeff, and we got there, and there was just horse trailers.
Yeah.
And Jeff is known to read less than I. And I said, "You're an idiot. This is a horse show." He goes, "It said field trial. I don't know what it is either." And then all of a sudden we saw people taking dogs out of little teeny boxes under the gooseneck, and we watched it. And what did I do? I got a Tennessee Walker.
That day.
Not that day, but wasn't very many days after.
Okay.
And my first one I should have kept. He was a short horse. He was a trail horse, and there is a chance that I could have went down the path of field trialing, but I had to have a bigger, taller horse. And then I found out I was actually afraid of horses. But I'm not really afraid of them.
Yeah.
Just haven't been around. Like if I come down,
we're going to get you a good one.
You put me on a horse. I probably can still remember how to put a saddle on. And
you ain't going to even have to do that. We'll do all that for you.
Well, yeah, but I want to try. And then I want to help me. But I want to sit on a horse, and I'd love to do the national too. I'd love to ride in that gallery and just see that. And more so just for that camaraderie, like, wow, like this shit's been going on for over 100 years.
Come down here, man, and I guarantee you we'll put you in them.
And if you can go back in that time machine and land up in 1902, you'd meet dog people that, I'm going to do it, Durrell. My daughter lives in Florida, so you are kind of on my way.
Come on. I got a horse for you. I got my horse. And I get you one. I'll borrow one for you down there, and it'll be a good horse. You ain't got to worry about a whole bunch of foolishness.
Well, here's the other mistake I made. You know what a trooper saddle is, right? That's the saddle.
That is the field trial saddle. Yes.
Well, so my wife, when we moved here, she wanted to take riding lessons, so she bought an English saddle, which is kind of like.
Yeah, that's actually what I ride. I got rid of my trooper and I have an English, but anywho, go ahead.
Yeah, but the trooper has that brass handle.
It's got it's honestly what you should have for that.
Right.
But
it's not a horn like a Western saddle, but
it's just a handle.
Right. But so I bought an English saddle, and then one of the guys that worked for me, he was a rodeo head, and he had a horse he called Knothead that was some Mustang he got.
Yeah.
And he would just torment me. Like we'd go trail riding around here on the gravel roads, and I when I was on a horse, I was like, oh man, I feel so. And then when that horse wanted to run, I was like, we don't have to run. We don't have to run. But I got to tell one more Jerry story here.
Go ahead.
So, just Jerry Bazell, I told you about, the guy that could run. There wasn't a crane or a bulldozer, or there wasn't anything mechanical this guy couldn't do. Literally,
Yeah.
built his own log home out of his own sawmill, does electrical, does hydraulics, does everything. He's having a party out on the runway. He took all of his equipment and borrowed some extra equipment and put a 1,800-foot runway in for a old plane.
Okay.
Old trainer. So, and he built a hangar and this guy did everything. I came out to the horse because there was a bunch of neighbors there. I'm like, oh, I'm going to come out on Trace. My big 16-hand walker that hates me, right? And I get out there, and Trace sees like a paper bag, and he gets all like, right? And I almost fall off the horse, and I get back, and I'm like, I'm okay. Jerry could drink more beer than me, if that's humanly possible, and never show a sign of it. And he says, "What? Gee, that flash, man! What the?" He said, "Give me that." I said, "Are you telling me you know how to ride horses too?" Never told me that his sister had him and he worked him when he was a kid. I'm just like, okay, dude, I finally got you. He grabbed that horse, put that foot up in his stirrup, got on that horse, ran it down the strip, turned it around, ran it back, got off, and handed me the reins. and I felt like somebody just deflated. So I want to be a horseman. I do. I just have to be honest. 1,500 pounds scares me.
Let me tell you. So 1,500 pounds will scare you, yes. But how I got mine, I had a come to Jesus moment with my horse, okay? I got mine, and I got him for a really good deal from a buddy of mine, Terry Chastain. He's a Dogman, fantastic dude. Just like a brother to me. And so I was like, Terry, I need a horse. And, you know, in Thomasville, people always selling horses. Like, you go on one of them plantations, you probably
it's probably like bass boats up in Michigan.
Yeah, like you can find a horse for sale down there, yeah. Right? And you pretty solid ones most of the time. And you get a couple knockoff, but for the most part, pretty good. And so he's like, well, I got this one. His name is Willie. Now, my horse is named Boss Man because I don't want a horse named Willie. But I'm like you about names, okay? Right. So I can't do Willie. So anywho, we get down there, and but I Neil checks him out. It's all good. I take him back home, and I put him in his stable. And the first thing he does when I try to go back in and get him the next day is walk to the corner and turn his butt to me. I was like, here we go. And Terry told me that's actually why he sold him to me. He was like, can't nobody else down here deal with this horse, because he always, and I said, well, Mr. Horse, you here now. You ain't going nowhere. This ain't really like a dog. I can't just pick up and move this one and then, right. We got to work with this. And so every day I was like, I would go into that stable, and I was just like, well, if you're going to kick me, you're going to kick me. If you're not going to kick me, turn your ass around so I can beat you. And so what happened, it got me like I started thinking like, all right, if he's going to turn his head, I took his, the little, lunging whip that I use, and I would tie a rope like a loop or whatever at the end, big enough for him to fit his head through.
Yeah.
And I was like, because he's not gonna let me walk around to get his head and bring him around. He just and I don't know if you bluffing or not.
Right.
So I put the little loop there. Do you know this joker turned his head and put his head in there like he had some sense that day?
Yeah.
I said, oh, so you're just bluffing. You think this is a game. You actually, The horse wasn't ever trying to do nothing.
Right.
He was just getting away with it
Right.
at that
Like,
plantation.
yeah, like a kid. Like,
Yes.
yeah.
He's like, I don't want to go anywhere. I don't want to do any work. So if every time I turn to the corner and make you think I'm gonna kick, y'all keep leaving.
Yeah.
And see, when I got the horse from Terry, Terry was like, Durrell, I could train it, and he's a heck of a horseman. But he was like, man, I got like 20 other horses that I'm dealing with. I don't have time. And I was like, don't worry about it. I got it. Ron, when I got that horse back to Atlanta, you here, bro. And we gonna figure this thing out. And he's been fantastic. Like it's just a different vibe, man. It's just a different energy. Now I wouldn't get no other kind of breeds. I'm Tennessee Walker sold for a whole lot of reasons, but yeah, it's fun. You know, it's really cool, you know, to have them.
Did you must have moved outside of where you grew up, right? Where are you now? Because you've got dogs and kennels. Are you keeping horses at home now?
Yeah, my horse stays with me at home.
Okay.
So we were blessed to live not far. If you're familiar with Atlanta, which I know you're not, but if you know where Six Flags is, like out once you get past Six Flags, it starts getting real rural. And Six Flags ain't but like 20 miles outside the city, if that. Yeah. And so this whole west side, like I said, I'm blessed that we have a lot of property, a lot of acreage, but then and it's 20 minutes away from the city. So we actually are not that far. I'm probably about 35 minutes away from where I grew up. And like you wouldn't even know I had horses here. Like you just wouldn't know I had a bunch of dogs and everything because my property, Atlanta has a funny thing because our properties down here are actually huge, you know, and back in the day before everybody and their mama came down here to make a movie, you know, the movie industry came here, people really had a lot of space, you know, in like suburban settings. So my backyard is very much so an old Atlanta space where I've got 2.5 acres there. My stable and kennels are connected. The dogs and horses interact with each other, or the dog and the dogs and the horse interact with each other is real cool. They're super quiet. My neighbors love them. They don't actually see, like all my neighbors recently just found out that I have 6 dogs and a horse. And and the thing is, again, just the resilience of African-American culture, maintaining some of those traditions. It's actually not weird for people to see me riding around, you know, the city and stuff like that. Like they'd be like, oh, okay, cool, whatever, you know. And you know, I don't do it a lot because I don't shoe my horse, but every so often we'll take a stroll through, you know, this suburban area that I'm at. You know, and then and it's cool because I occasionally find like huge strips of land that don't nobody own. And I do sprints and stuff like that all through. We have a whole day and it's like a whole trail, and I won't be that far away from my house. You know, and then of course the training that I do is just in the back. Like I can do all the stuff I need to do with them there. You know, and then what's also really cool where I live at, I had this other setter named Rose. I really like, she was a tricolor dog, and she was like Houdini, man. Like she would always pick the locks to my kennel. And like, I don't know how she did it or what, but
I've had dogs that could figure that shit out.
Yeah. And I was like, what are you doing? Like, how do you keep getting out? And she wasn't up to nothing. I think she just was screwing with me and would pick it. And then, well, one day she actually like left the property or whatever. And I had a whole bunch of training quail and stuff like that back there too. And I don't shoot birds in my yard or whatever. I just let them flush away. Well, this old guy that lives around the corner from me, probably 2 minutes walking down the street, and he's driving his pickup, and here comes my dog running in front of this pickup, and he's slow creeping the dog back to my house. And I walk out and I was like, oh, Rose, get over here, girl. And she comes over, you know, I put her in the back of my dog box at the time in the front yard. And he was like, man, I figured this was your dog. You the only one around here with bird dogs in this neighborhood. And I was like, oh, and he was like, I was just so thrilled. He was like, I haven't seen bird dogs here in forever. But and the owner of the previous owner of the house that sold it, he was like 90 something when he died. He hadn't seen a setter in this neighborhood in 40 years. Well, this my neighbor was like, he was like, and these must be your quail that keep getting into my garden. He was like, I haven't seen, he was like, I have not heard bobwhite quail call in this neighborhood in over 40 years. So
that
there
had
used
to
to
be
be
like
wild birds here.
that was like music to his ears.
Yeah. Oh, he was happy. And
Yeah.
he was just, I mean, this dude's got to be in his 70s, 80s. He's always out there taking care of his garden. And
Yeah.
he was like, I always keep an eye on it. I see you walking with your dogs and stuff like that. I see your horse. He's like, I just think it's great. I haven't, all of my neighbors are like that. The kids, like, I might get neighborhood kids or whatever. Like, if I got my horse out, like, in the front where people would see him, it is the people are just, it's an educational opportunity. And if I get some quail, like I
It's
used
like
to
walking a dog in they're like, oh wow, a horse. Yeah.
Yeah.
They pet the horse a little bit and all that shit.
It's super cool.
Before this goes into a 4-parter,
Yeah.
I said I was gonna pick on you. Now I can't pick on you because I love your backdrop. I see all your stuff.
The pointers.
Yeah, and you can see some of my stuff behind me.
Yep. Oh, I see that quail you got in the bed. That quail fleshing back there.
Yeah. But this is something, and I am sure, just like when e-collars came out, there was trainers that were like, that is the dumbest, laziest thing. They don't allow them in Europe, right? They don't allow. Who started putting the dog collar around the dog's waist? I know it wasn't you because it was around.
No, it was not
you.
Yep.
But I saw one of your dogs in the video.
Yep.
And to me, this is my version. When I see a dog with an e-collar around its waist, I think that Helen Keller was told to go put the collar on the dog and she just nipped the neck. But there's got to be, explain to me if you can, not where it came from, but the
methodology, I guess.
The methodology.
So the first place I saw it, and I have the first photo of when I saw it because it came from the first day that I met Neil. Mm-hmm. So he had a little setter, not a little setter, a little pointer, and he put it back there. And I was like, like you, I always saw e-collars around the neck.
Right.
That was how I understood it. I saw labs do it. I had a lab. I saw other pointers do it.
Right.
Cool. Well, Neil did it, and I was like, what's the purpose of this? Like, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
And this is why. And it is hardcore proven. Not every dog needs it, but particularly with pointers, when they got a lot of drive, you want this, right? So you ever heard of that term riding the lightning with a dog?
No.
Well, you can turn your e-collar up as high as you possibly can. Oh, and the dog will run through it. We call it riding the lightning. Like some pointers will do that. Like I had my jughead dog, he would run through it.
Right.
Some dogs just, for some odd reason, that stimulation doesn't stop them. That doesn't equate to stop. That equates to, I don't know what this is. This hurts and I'm out. Like I'm gone. And I'm gonna just keep running because they're kind of panicking. And I'm gonna keep running until it does right. And then all you're doing is ruining the dog.
Yeah.
Because he's not stopping, so he's not getting the message, and he's wigging out. So I said, Neil, why do you do that? And he said, well, look, think about it like this. A dog, if you split a dog in half, like from his rib cage back or rib cage forward, that's like a dog's power steering, your left and your right. He was like that. He was like, and he would actually train with 2 e-collars at a point, one on the neck and then one on the flank. And he was like, when I need to teach my dogs to handle to my calling and to cast and go left and right and do all that, he was like, I tone them and I teach them that from the neck. He was like, I don't put pressure up there. He was like, because when I need you to stop, I need you to stop. And he was like, you put an e-collar down on the back, it's like a dog's brakes. And it has worked like that for me for like, I mean, it's been magic. You put a dog that doesn't want to whoa through an e-collar, like it knows the job, but because I don't believe in teaching a dog with an e-collar, I'm reinforcing it. But when you put that on their flank, on a pointer particularly, but other dogs too, short haired setters, whatever, they stop. Like they clean cut, boop, like no more. They do not.
It gets the point across better.
Mm-hmm. And I'll have it on a really low setting. It's not high. Like I use a Garmin 550 plus for training. I'll probably have it on a 3 low.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? If not a too high, too mid. And that will stop a dog. I think that skin is thin down there.
Oh
And
yeah.
so
Well, I
it's
mean, look at how many times I've told 100 people this when we're at a test. The dog doesn't want to let go of the bird. You
Mhm.
just reach down under the groin there and give them a
pull
little twist,
it.
and they open their mouth.
Yep.
But I have yet to ever find anybody that. And I see Travis Frank, his dog.
Mhm.
So I know trainers are doing this.
It
But
works.
it's got to work. But I'm like,
But it
am I
can
ever
be
gonna
too
do this?
much for a dog too. Like you also have to teach a dog like what that pressure is.
Oh
Because
yeah,
if not,
got to turn off the pressure.
yeah, like so what I do, I have this weird little trick to introduce them to collar pressure back there as
Yeah.
pups. And I kind of evaluate it. Like some dogs don't need it. I've got dogs that they learn with a collar around the neck and that's it. Like,
Right.
it's not it's usually my hotter dogs.
Yeah.
And so what I do, I actually take two of those Delmar Smith Wonder Leads.
Yeah.
I take two of them. I put one on the neck here, like it would be correct in any other time, and I put one on the flank.
So
And
they
I
start with the
played Puppet
wonder lead.
Master.
They start with
Yep.
the wonder lead,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just another way of turning off the pressure under
That's
the
it.
waist. Yeah.
That's it. And I'm so close to them, so they understand what's going on. And I just play Puppet Master for a second, and I can do that in a little area. Walk
Yeah.
a couple steps, pull on the flank, and then they're like, "Oh crap!" Because some of them it's super sensitive, so they wig out for a second,
Right.
and then they realize, "Oh, I'm not about to die if I just stop. The pressure's off."
Right.
And then when I need to teach them to go left and right, I'll pull on the one on the neck.
Yeah. So you got two turn signals, or
Two turns. That's all.
you got
You
two.
know.
But I'm telling you, for when I see it, and I've seen it in magazines, and I'm like, God, the only thing I can think of is like that new person who listens to a podcast, your,
Mm-hmm.
mine, Nick's, and Tyler's, and he sees that. All I hope for is that guy doesn't walk up to his dog
Yeah.
and start the collar conditioning around the waist. Like,
Oh God, like don't do that.
right. Because
please don't do that.
it looks like Helen Keller put
Yep.
told Helen, like, hey, go put a collar on the dog, and she just missed the neck.
Ron, when I tell you so we do bird dog demos down here, and I've done a lot of education stuff, and usually it's like if I'm running a young dog, right, I'll have it back there, and it never fails. I get two questions during these demos every time. Number one, why are you using an e-collar? Because e-collars are bad, blah, blah, blah. And I go through that and explain it. But then it's, okay, so why is it on his bottom? Like it never fails every time. And I explain just separating the dog and power steering versus your brakes. And it never fails. And the goal run, I would like to train away from that. Like that's not something I just want to keep in the tool belt. Like whatever I'm breeding, whatever it is that I bring in, the goal is to, pick up, breed, develop, whatever it is that you do. The dog should be easier the next go round.
Right.
I don't.
If you do everything right, like your mentor, Neil, he didn't. E-collars didn't come around. He was in it for 40 years before there was an e-collar.
Right. He was how they did it. They were running dogs down.
But they also got them to be steady to wing, shot, and fall.
Right. And they did it without collars. And it took, and what Neil would tell me, he was like, he would take like a 50-foot 50-foot check cord. They were making their own check cords 50 feet. Yeah. And the dogs that were super hot, he got on his best horse, and if they were taking off and wouldn't stop, he would have to run them, and the horse would figure out to step on the
lead rope.
But like we've come a long way from that.
Right. Well, we should say, just for edification of anybody who's new in the world, the e-collar is just another language, right?
Right.
There's the whistle, there's the hand, there's the verbal. If you get a dog that can do that, they've basically learned French, German, English, and Spanish.
Yep.
Just another way of saying no or come or whatever. But I'm sorry, that look, look,
It looks silly. I'm not gonna lie. It looks silly.
It looks silly.
Oh, wait till the first time you put it on them. They walk dumber than it looks.
Oh, that's probably like putting boots on them.
They are like, what is this?
Whoa, 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 whoa.
You know, and then you go through the process of, oops, I might have put that on too tight. So and you see him running, and he looked funny.
Yeah. Listen, I gotta get in here pretty soon. I don't know what you got to do tonight, but I'm not going to cut this apart. This is going to go full length, but I will promise you. And when I promise somebody, I'm gonna come down there. You're gonna put me on a horse.
Yep.
You're gonna take me some of that red clay country.
Yep.
I want to meet some of your friends, and just enjoy the conversation.
I got you.
That's all I like doing, is enjoying the conversation. Because if somebody said, "Well, what if they banned hunting with dogs?" I said, "Well, I would still have dogs."
Yeah, yeah.
I would still have dogs. Yeah.
Now bring that old Tagus down here too, man, so we can talk about it.
He's too sweet. He's too sweet. He probably
bring one of the Broncos so they can call it a hound dog or something like
right.
that.
I'll bring that new 10-month-old Bronco down there and see what she does.
There you go. You know, we're gonna talk about you. Bring some, give us some ammo.
I will get down there, and it may not be hunting season, it might be training season, but I'll get down there.
Yep.
I'm not gonna like the heat, but I'll get over that. That.
There will be cold drinks afterwards for you.
That's good, and I know I've seen the group of people you hang out with, and I want to hang out with them.
We are all degenerates, my friend. So
that's exactly right.
We are all degenerates. So you come on and you fit right on in.
I'm gonna fit in there like a glove,
Yeah.
All right, buddy. Listen, I'm gonna let you go, but we'll do this again. But real quick, there's a couple things that you have with your podcast and everything you're doing with Orvis.
Yep.
But I also want to ask give a little rundown on that. And everybody always asks me, what trips do you have this year? I always have a couple. You got any special trips this year anywhere?
Yeah. So as far as everything I got going on, I've got the Sporting Life Notebook podcast and the Sporting Life Notebook just brand at this point in time, because we've done a lot of different things. SportingLifeNotebook.com is where all of that is centrally located, and we're doing a lot of cool stuff on YouTube too. I got this weird thing. I'm trying to infuse blues into everything now, so I'm doing that with bird dogs. But then we've got this other fantastic thing that I've been developing for the last few years, and being an Orvis endorsed wing shooting guide opened this up. But I've got a new company called the Sporting Life Outfitters. And it's just the formalization of all the guiding that I've been doing over the years, which leads into the trips that I'm taking. So for guiding, public land, wild birds only here in Georgia from November to February. But then I've got another hosted hunt opportunity in Minnesota for rough grouse.
Oh, that's right. You're going up to Minnesota.
Yep. So I'll be going back. That'll be October 11th through the 19th. So I'm booking for that. So that's the business of it in the hunts. And I'm working on setting up some Western hosted hunts as well, out in like Texas and that general area. Mm-hmm. So I've got Georgia and Minnesota that I'm working on now. But as far as my personal hunts, the fun stuff, the really fun stuff, I'm going back to Oregon, working on that project for TRCP. So we'll be going back to hunt chucker there in the Owyhee Canyon. For my birthday, my wife told me we can go out to West Texas to hunt desert quail, so I might be doing that. And let me see what other big trip. The Oregon is like the big trip. Like that's a
long haul.
We drove, me and my buddy Sav Sankarin from Orvis as well. Hell of a bluegrass singer, just all Dogmen, all that stuff. Anyway, he came down from North Carolina, and we hopped in the truck, and it was 35 hours from Atlanta to the Owyhee Canyon. Wow. Went out there, hunted not enough days, got it done. and then came on back. But this year we're gonna stay a little bit longer and get a lot more days out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So that's the biggest trip.
that's cool. Well,
Yeah.
like I said, I'll get down to you before you get to me, but
Yep.
if you ever get to Michigan,
Oh, I'm calling. If I'm even in the area, I'm calling you. And
Right.
dude, thank you for having me on. This is like an honor, man. I've been listening to you forever, so
Yes.
thank you.
No, I just love talk. Everyone says I'm like my mom, just blah, 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 blah. I just love talking. But I
I'm
love
here.
it. That's why when I have somebody to come on that just can talk,
Yeah.
it takes like, I don't have to, I had like 4 questions here. Like, oh,
I
had
thought
your
we just
first
been
thought.
winging it the whole time.
Yeah, I had a couple questions like, well, fine, he'll just carry it.
Yep.
And when we
You do
get
not have to
together,
worry about me having to talk.
when you get up here, I'm going to drag you into my wife's art studio because you don't teach
Please.
art
Yes.
anymore,
Nope.
but
Nope.
you're going to love her art studio.
So I'm not teaching it, but I'm still practicing 24/7.
Right. I've seen some, it kind of reminds me of those, there was a famous picture like in Rocky 3 or 4
Mhm.
where it was Apollo Creed and Rocky fighting. And it doesn't look like you threw paint at it, but it looks like
Yeah.
you dabbled the.
It's real quick. The gestures are really
Right,
fast.
but
I paint very fast.
Right. But it says exactly what it's supposed to say.
Yeah.
And I've seen
that means a lot. Thank you.
and I've got to send you a picture of my wife has a BFA in sculpture,
Yeah.
and she did some glass casts, like about the size of a paper
Yeah.
novel, right? About 5 inches wide, 8-9 inches tall. And there's a embossed head of a dog with a bird in its mouth. I got to send you that.
Gotta send me that.
And then I got to see it down at, oh God, here we go. I got to
Yeah.
see and
I just got to give you the whole Southern experience, man.
right. And I will tell you, I can't paint, but I have a good hand on clay and everything.
I believe it.
I have an artistic side to me. I do.
Well, I mean, you worked in construction your whole life, man. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. The tactile nature of everything. I would imagine you probably a heck of a sculptor, dude.
Yeah, in anything, if your brain can talk to your hands and your hands can do it.
Yep.
But there's a lot of people that can't, but that's okay.
It's all right. But the thing is,
you're
man,
left-handed?
I am left-handed, but
Yep.
I'm left-hand dominant. I'm ambidextrous.
Right. And I'm left-handed. My wife's left-handed, and she's an artist, and I'm a wannabe artist.
we all doing the same thing. That's the thing, man. Left-handed people are dope. And your birthday probably somewhere around February. Because if it is, I'm gonna say we brothers or something like that. Because that is the weirdest thing in the world. Like
I don't know, but it's hard to say. Well, I can't wait. I can't wait for us to do something on a horse and something in the wood.
Yep. You come down, man. You let me know, and we will set it out for you. I will give you the entire Southern experience. And please do not go and buy soul food. Do not do that. We will make it for you. Okay. I don't know why people come down to the South and like buy soul food. I don't get it. We'll make it for you. If that's
I'm excited already. I'm going to tell my daughter I'm coming down to Pensacola to meet her, but I'll have a little detour.
There you go. There you go.
Right,
and we're going to pull these pointers out of here for you.
All right. Sounds good, Durrell.
Thank you so much, Ron.